Hey guys, how's it going? So right now I'll be doing a review of the Galaxy Watch Ultra. So I've had this for almost 30 days and take a look at some of the data I was able to get from the health app. I bet there aren't going to be much other reviewers with this much data because I actually use this as my main and only watch since it came out. And I'm really excited to talk about it. First, let's start off with the build and the design. I want to say though, when I first saw all the press materials and even the leaks, I was really disappointed. I thought this was going to be a very unattractive looking watch, but this is one of those times it actually takes getting this product in your hand and on your wrist to really appreciate how nice it actually looks. And I'm really happy I went with the black version here with these orange accents. There's a lot of attention to detail towards the design too. So looking at the case here, it's mostly a matte finish, but around the edges it's smoothed out, maybe chamfered. That gives it a really nice luster, a bit of a shininess, makes it look a lot more premium. And also the bezel on the top here, which unfortunately does not rotate. I'll get to that a little bit later on, but really nicely polished and really well designed. The sides, everything is made out of metal, even the back. And new to this year, Samsung has their exclusive watch bands, which makes it much easier to put on and off. Definitely appreciate that. Really easy to do, but it's also unfortunate that bands for the Galaxy Watch Ultra are now proprietary. And I do want to tackle the elephant in the room that this is a copy of the Apple Watch Ultra. I think that Samsung takes a lot of inspiration from Apple, but they do also make it their own. The shape is actually very different, and when you have them side by side, they actually don't really look alike that much at all. So while I would say that there's a lot of elements borrowed from the Apple Watch Ultra, I think Samsung took it in a different direction, and I think that they actually made a much better looking watch than the Apple Ultra could have ever been. So next I want to talk about the display really quickly. There's not going to be much surprises here. It's great. It's a Samsung screen, advertises 3000 nits and outdoor brightness. It seems very adequately bright. It doesn't get as dim. It doesn't go down to 1 hertz the way the new Pixel Watch 3 will and the Apple Watch Ultra 2 does. So at nighttime, I either going into bedtime mode or I'm messing with these settings or I'm taking off the always on display. Something that they could have worked on, but not the end of the world. This resolution is nice and crisp. It's got more than a high enough PPI to make these watch faces be very convincing. So yeah, I don't know. Can't spend too much time on the screen. It's good. Next, I want to tackle the performance. And this is something that has always bugged me about Galaxy watches. They always seem like they're snappy at first, like for the first few days, maybe even the first week or two, but then it would slowly start to slow down. That's one reason why I wanted to wait a while before I actually reviewed this. And I'm really happy that the performance has been top notch on this watch. Navigation has been incredibly fast throughout the entire OS, opening apps, doing workouts while listening to Spotify, using Google Maps when you need to. It's as fast as like a modern smartphone now, which is good. It has not always been there. If you've used any previous Galaxy watches, you know what I'm talking about with the amount of slowdown. Just going through all the different menus is insanely fast too. So this new processor that Samsung is using has really improved the overall experience of using this watch. And the best way to really highlight that too is when you go to the resets. That always used to be incredibly slow and difficult to deal with. All of my previous apps are opening up very quickly. So, and like I said, that was not always the case with Galaxy Watch. And also speed and performance on a smartwatch is a lot more important than a lot of people might give it credit for. When smartwatches are on your wrist, you're already holding it in a very uncomfortable manner. If you're waiting around for apps to open up, you're just going to be less likely to use a lot of the features that a watch has to offer. And that's how I felt about most other Galaxy watches in the past. I eventually just only use them to look at notifications because everything else is just a bit sluggish to get into. But man, really happy that that's fixed. But when Samsung takes one step forward, they end up taking one step back. The navigation of this watch now is a little bit more cumbersome because there is no rotating dial. So, but now we have it as a touchscreen and it doesn't always work properly. It works most times than not, but it's just not as fluid, and you kind of have to use a bit of thought to use this touch bezel, or you could just rely completely on the touchscreen itself, which honestly is what I've been doing most of the time. But at the end of the day, this is still as big of a screen that this is. This is still a small screen, and my finger is already like half of the size of this watch already. So navigation is a bit cumbersome because I just don't have the right controls, like a rotating crown or a rotating dial. Or what I like about a lot of these other fitness focus watches like Polar and what Garmin does is you can essentially navigate the entire interface with physical buttons, and I really feel that that is the right way to go. That is something I wish for all of these smartwatches. I'd like having a touchscreen, but I also like having physical buttons as well, especially when you're running or if it's cold and you're wearing gloves, etc. I think that's something that all smartwatches can start to include. I know I'm complaining about this, but I really believe after like a day or two, you're gonna not miss the rotating dial as much anymore. I'm not saying that they shouldn't include it next time. They absolutely should, but it hasn't been the deal breaker that I was thinking it could potentially be. All right, next I want to talk about the overall interface. It's overall a great interface. Swipe to the left, notifications, swipe to the right, and you have all these widgets you can set up, and they're great. I use these a lot, especially when it comes to the calendar with my 9 to 5, and then just being able to look at all of my health metrics in one tile. A lot of good stuff here. One issue I have though, and I feel like this is a very antiquated way of doing notifications. I hate that I can only see one notification per swipe. It's a bit annoying. So what it does do though is it groups it by app. So if one particular app has several notifications, it'll group it. And you can see right here I have two for the weather. And then it brings it up this way, and then you would think that you might just that you could just swipe it away to clear it, but you can't. You have to click into it and then clear it there. And the pinch to zoom, I should probably talk about now since that icon came up. It works like 90% of the time, and I know that sounds good. 90% is like an A if you're in school, but when it comes to using tech products, you like if something only works 90% of the time, there's a good chance that a lot of people won't use it. So I still think that they need to tweak it. What I like that Apple does is, even though the pinch gesture doesn't work in every single app, Apple at least tells you that, hey, we registered that it works, but it's not going to actually do anything here. Sometimes even when it should work, it doesn't get registered, etc. So, I mean, I do use it and I pray that it works every time, but it just doesn't always work. So hopefully they can address that a little bit more with software. But I think it's a bit of a pain to only be able to see one notification at a time. Like, so even like the Polar Watch here, when you swipe up from the bottom, you're only seeing one at a time, but I guess it's easier to swipe up. And this is the CMF watch too. And even right here, you can just see several notifications at a time. It's just a lot easier to deal with. So I think Samsung should really change the way that they do notifications. It could be a lot better in the future, so I'm not swiping around this much. And yes, you can just use the rotating dial, but like I mentioned, it's kind of a pain sometimes. I want to talk about one more negative, and then I promise it's going to be all positive from here, is the speakers. So even though the speakers are large, the sound is a little bit tinny and there's not much mids in the voices. That's not something I've experienced with something like the Apple Watch, where I'm able to hear very clearly the person on the other end of the line. Because of that, if I'm outside or in a semi-crowded area, I wouldn't even bother answering the phone with the speakerphone. All right, so with all the negatives out of the way, let's just get right into some more positives. And that would be the entire fitness suite that Samsung has now, and it is really deep and rich. I look forward to seeing what my sleep score is every morning and what my energy score is. So it's something that's been really motivating me to try to go to bed earlier, etc. From what I'm able to gather, the accuracy of the sleep is spot on. I have a good idea of when I fall asleep and when I wake up. And it does automatic nap tracking too. Once you take a nap for long enough, it'll pick up on that. You don't even have to set up anything, or you don't have to go into nap mode or anything. So then after you sleep for 7 nights, it gives you an animal, and I'm a penguin. I don't really know what that means, But they did say that I need to improve on my sleep. So they're giving me a checklist to do every single day, to do some meditation, etc., to avoid naps, eat breakfast, all that stuff to help me get a better night's sleep. And if you have a Samsung phone, if your phone is being charged while sleeping, it'll pick up on snore detection. And it picked up on my snores a few times too. So I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but it does that. So when you wake up in the morning, it gives you a lot of details on your sleep, from the sleep time, restfulness, etc. And it gives you a percentage so you know if it's good or bad. And here you can see, and I do remember that I did wake up for 21 minutes this particular evening. It tracks my blood oxygen level during sleep, the entire sleep too. I didn't charge my watch that night, so it's probably not showing that I snored. And it shows my skin temperature throughout the entire sleep too. My overall heart rate, which is getting higher and higher. I've noticed that once I'm exercising regularly, my resting heart rate could go down to like 55, 57. So that's sleep. And there's also this ages index too, which seems to be hovering around like the mid level for me. It just gives you a good idea of what your metabolic health is. So I don't know. I don't understand that too much. I'm not gonna go into it. And it just does all day stress measuring once you enable that in the watch itself. And you need to, because by default it's not. So what you would do is just go to the heart rate sensor, scroll all the way down, and then go to measure continuously, and you would do the same thing for stress. Just go down to settings and then measure continuously. So I'll talk about the impact of that in battery in the next section, but I just want, there's some more stuff in health that I want to wrap up. And the auto workout has been picking up on my daily walks every single time. And I've done a few bike rides and I've done a few runs, and the heart rate sensor has been spot on. And I have a good idea of what my heart rate will be as I'm exercising, because this Polar does a really good job with accuracy and heart rates. Garmin has been the best at it. And I feel like the Apple Watch is right in line with those, and you don't have to take my word for it. There's a lot of fitness focused tech channels out there who do a much better job of going into exercising and GPS accuracy than I ever will. And there's one thing I want to quickly point out. When you're actually in a run, the data screens, there's a lot of data now, way more than Samsung ever used to have. So I have all of the metrics that I look at when I go on a workout that I would typically get from something like a Garmin. And one thing I really like about it when you're actually in a workout too, so sometimes you want to change a data screen. With every other smartwatch, you either have to leave the workout itself or go home and then go to settings, etc. No, now you literally just press and hold it, and then you can change the data fields on the fly. If there's a lot of fitness focused smartwatch enthusiasts out there, like, you probably know what I mean. This is a clutch feature. Samsung has been adding more and more to their watches every year, and they really nailed it. So what I want to talk about now, I as you probably noticed, I'm using this watch heavy, and it's not the way that Samsung intended to when it's out of the box. I had to enable a lot of different settings. I am using the always on display all the time. And with that, my battery life has been like a day and maybe like 5 hours. So I am charging this every single day. If you take off a lot of these other settings, then you're going to get closer to the advertised battery life of, I think they said 2 or 3 days. But I am charging this every single day. So what I've been doing is I would charge it at like 8 o'clock, and then before I go to bed, I would put it on. When I would wake up, it would be around 80 to 85% battery life. And then as I use it throughout the day, it'll just slowly drain. But what I have noticed though is if I do a GPS enabled workout, it's going to drain the battery even more. So I probably won't even make it through a full day if I go for like a 45-minute workout that's using GPS. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you do travel with this, you have to bring the charger, or you'll have to take off the always on display. Just taking off the always on display alone will give you almost an entire extra day of life. But I like the always on display, and it's something that I keep on. It's a shame that Samsung doesn't have an LTPO display that only would go down to 1 hertz when in always on display mode, or having a dimmer panel that goes down to 1 nit, the way the Apple Watch Ultra does and the way the Pixel Watch does. But yeah, I mean, overall, we're still not at the point where we're getting a perfect watch here yet. But this is my favorite smartwatch out of all of them that I've used, including the Apple Watch, including the Pixel Watch, including any Garmin watch, because this has all the focus fitness features that I want. This has the best build and design out there. Honestly, this entire ecosystem right now that Samsung has created has been great to use, and it's making me sad that I actually have to pack these up and send them back to Samsung soon. So you're going to see me using all the products throughout the year, but it doesn't mean that I didn't like the overall experience of them. It's actually the opposite. But so if I was to quit YouTube tomorrow, I would just keep this package right here and just be happy until hopefully next year. But with that being said, that's going to do it for this review. Hope you guys liked it. It's probably a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but hopefully there's some detail in there and hopefully you got some value out of it that you maybe haven't seen in some of the other channels. If you have, like this video. If you want to see more, subscribe, etc. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.